This is an act of aggression that is completely trumped up in terms of its pretext. It's really 19th century behavior in the 21st century. And, you know, the reason for this, David, is because you just don't invade another country on phony pretext in order to assert your interests.
When Secretary of State John Kerry made his now infamous statement about Russia's actions in Ukraine, the hypocrisy was immediately apparent to all but the most clueless of viewers.
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised. The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't, but he had the capacity to make weapons of mass destruction. But I also talked about the human suffering in Iraq. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
But perhaps Kerry wasn't so wrong to expect the public to let him get away with such a transparently hypocritical statement. After all, the public have always been happy to go along with every pretext for war presented to them for decade after decade. After Iraq, there was Libya, where we were asked to believe that the invasion of the oil-rich country and rush to set up a central bank by the foreign-backed opposition was nothing more than an attempt to save the country from a power-mad dictator who was arming his troops with Viagra to help them rape innocent civilians.
Nick, you had a chance to speak with the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, the issue being Gaddafi, the Libyans, what they're doing. What did he tell you?
Well, one of the things he wants to investigate now, he says, his priority is to investigate allegations of rape that may be systematic and rape that's being assisted, he said, by the distribution of Viagra or Viagra-like products, sexually performance-enhancing products that are getting in the hands of Gaddafi's forces and are being used as part of gang rape. And these are allegations that are surfacing that he says he wants to investigate as a priority.
Until this pretext was overturned by a pesky reporter asking for actual evidence of these crimes.
How many people have been killed, and in which town, in which site, and what kind of the crimes he has ever done in your investigations?
I advise you to read the application of the prosecutor's office, many pages, I think it was 77 pages. We describe in detail the facts. Most of it is public. And the judges also decided, analyzing the evidence. So, of course, we are prosecutors and judges, so we rely on facts. So we prove the crimes. That's what we did. We present the case to the judges, and for a month and 10 days, 3 judges from 3 different continents make an independent evaluation, and they decided.
As pointed out by Luis Moreno Ocampo, the document does have 77 pages, but most of its content is not public. Pages 17 to 71 have been redacted, precisely the ones enclosing the summaries of evidence and testimonies.
Before Iraq, there was Afghanistan, where we were asked to believe that the war was necessary in order to get bin Laden, until we were told that was not actually the case.
So I don't know where he is, nor do, I just don't spend that much time on him, Kelly, to be honest with you.
Similarly with the invasion of Grenada.
When the U.S. military made it clear that it was going to base this invasion on a partially on a threat to U.S. medical students on the island, the U.S. media jumped in as if there really was a threat. Of course, there wasn't. That's why none of the medical students were hurt. When the United States made it appear as if Grenada was a base for Cuban operatives, the media started looking for them and imagining them and passing on reports of Cubans in military capacities.
And the Vietnam War.
Renewed hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas in the Gulf of Tonkin have today required me to order the military forces of the United States to take action in reply.
it does appear now that a lot of these torpedo attacks were from the sonar man, you see. And they get keyed up to a thing like this. Everything they hear on the sonar is a torpedo.
You're pretty sure there was a torpedo attack, then?
Oh, no doubt about that, yeah. I think. No doubt about that.
No, it was just confusion. And events afterwards showed that our judgment that we'd been attacked that day was wrong.
And World War II.
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
On the night of December 6, 1941, intercept stations picked up heavy Japanese radio traffic from Tokyo to their embassy in Washington. The machines clattered with the intercepted purple code groups. The tapes were rushed to the code breakers on Constitution Avenue where the ciphers were decrypted. The text was then teletyped to the State Department. It ordered the Japanese ambassador to break off diplomatic relations at precisely 1 p.m. Washington time, when the sun was just rising over the Hawaiian Islands.
That vital need was the information available in Washington from the intercepted dispatches, which told when and where Japan would probably strike. I did not get this information.
And World War I.
Now, the Lusitania was a British passenger ship on its way from New York to England, 1915. At that time, England was at war with Germany, but we had not yet joined World War I. Well, the ship went down, and the Americans were told that the Germans simply sank this ship to be ruthless. They saw an innocent passenger ship, wanted to kill a lot of women and children, and so down it went. But that's not why the Germans sank it. They sank it because the Lusitania was loaded from one end to the other with munitions, millions of rounds of ammunition and many other munitions. Everyone who survived that disaster said there were two explosions, smaller one and then a huge one. The small one was a torpedo hitting. The large one was the munitions detonating. The ship went down in just 18 minutes after a single torpedo hit. By the way, that's confirmed also by the logbook of the sub that sank. Lusitania, the U-20's logbook said one torpedo followed by massive explosion. Equally significant, before the tragedy, Winston Churchill, who was then head of the British Admiralty, had ordered a study to be done to determine what the political impact would be if a British passenger ship was sunk with Americans on board. And there were almost 200 Americans on board the Lusitania. And prior to the sinking of the Lusitania, an exchange took place between Sir Edward Grey, the British foreign minister, and Edward Mandell House, who was President Woodrow Wilson's top advisor. Here's the exchange of communications. Grey: what will America do if the Germans sink an ocean liner with American passengers on board? House's reply: I believe that a flame of indignation would sweep the United States, and that by itself would be sufficient to carry us into the war.
And the Spanish-American War.
When word of the Maine explosion reached America, some people, including the powerful newspaper owner William Randolph Hearst, immediately blamed Spain. And most of the public believed them. But a nagging question remained. No direct evidence linking Spain to the sinking of the Maine had been found. So why had the ship blown up? In the 1970s, the Navy launched a new investigation into the case. Admiral Hyman Rickover concluded that the explosion aboard the Maine was not caused by a mine at all. Instead, the ship sank because of a terrible accident. Using various techniques, modern researchers have confirmed Rickover's conclusion that the blast was probably indirectly caused by a spontaneous combustion fire inside the Maine's coal bunker.
It would be the height of naivete to believe that the political caste of our own age were any different in their willingness to blatantly fabricate false pretexts to rally the public into war. But perhaps the public is finally catching on. Kony 2012 became a viral video sensation 2 years ago, with press-seeking celebrities endorsing the slick propaganda, seeking to justify the deployment of AFRICOM troops to Uganda in the search for Joseph Kony. But the video was quickly exposed as a sham when independent internet-based researchers discovered that the producers of the video, a group called Invisible Children, had been working with US aid and attended a US State Department-linked summit in London in 2010. The simplistic Kony narrative was further undermined when the internet enabled Ugandans to speak out directly against the video to viewers around the world.
When the 2012 video came out, there was this general feeling that it oversimplified the story of Uganda and also the story of northern Uganda, but also it did not tell the current stories of people in northern Uganda and the current challenges. But also we saw that the story was grossly mistold.
Similarly in Syria, the August 2013 chemical weapons attack in Ghouta was quickly seized upon as a pretext for military intervention in the country.
The indiscriminate slaughter of civilians, the killing of women and children and innocent bystanders by chemical weapons is a moral obscenity. By any standard, it is inexcusable, and despite the excuses and equivocations that some have manufactured, it is undeniable.
A study has now challenged the US claim that Syrian government forces carried out the attack. The study is being conducted by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the MIT. Based on mathematical calculations, the study examined the range of the improvised rocket used in the attack, saying it was too short to have been launched from government-controlled areas. The MIT report concludes that based on the firing range and the troop locations, all possible launching points within a 2-kilometer radius were in insurgent-controlled areas. The report goes on to challenge the US Secretary of State's key assessments of the chemical attack that he presented to the American people last August in an effort to muster support for a military strike on Syria.
And massive worldwide protests, organized on the back of the public's incredulity at yet another Iraq WMD-like lie, managed to get the Obama administration to back off its headlong rush to war. And now, another Kony 2012-like video production is attempting to make a similar case for why Americans and their NATO bloc allies need to be involved in the current Ukrainian crisis.
And now I ask you to build this freedom in our country. You can help us only by telling this story to your friends, only by sharing this video. Please share it. Speak to your friends, speak to your family, speak to your government, and show that you support us.
And just like Kony 2012, this video, too, was exposed for its ties back to the Council on Foreign Relations and the US State Department foreign policy apparatus.
The origins of the video are not quite as grassroots as is portrayed. The clip was produced by the team behind A Whisper to a Roar, a documentary about the fight for democracy all over the world, which was funded by Prince Moulay Hicham of Morocco. The quote, inspiration behind the documentary was none other than Larry Diamond, the Council on Foreign Relations member. The Council on Foreign Relations is considered to be America's most influential foreign policy think tank and has deep connections with the US State Department. Hillary Clinton even half-joked that she wouldn't have to go far to get her orders because the CFR is just down the street from the US State Department.
But it's good to have an outpost of the Council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the Council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
Perhaps the saddest part of all is that once the people whose plight was exploited for the war propaganda have been used, abused, chewed up, and spit out by the war machine, they are completely forgotten about. How many of those same flag-waving propaganda repeaters that pretended to care about the Libyan people, for example, even know what is happening in the country now that the NATO bombs have stopped raining down and the corporate media is telling us to look elsewhere?
We filmed from our hotel balcony as two rival militia clashed. It turned into the worst fighting since the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi. Libya's weak government has no control. The men with guns are a law unto themselves. The brigades who spearheaded the Libyan revolution now threaten to destroy it.
The simple truth is that the people who fight and die in these bloody wars of aggression are never the ones who benefit from the slaughter. For this reason, the combined resources of the State Department, the corporate media, and countless foundation-funded NGOs are required to sell these lies to an increasingly skeptical public. But now we stand at a crossroads of history, with the public, perhaps for the first time, able to instantly research and expose the propagandistic claims of the ruling establishment almost as soon as they are made. In some ways, the public is better positioned than ever to abandon that 19th century world of war pretexts that Kerry was referring to. Perhaps we can start by consigning politicians like Kerry, and all the other liars who have enabled countless slaughter, warfare, and bloodshed throughout the years, to the dustbin of history by simply refusing to believe their transparent lies. This video is brought to you by the subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information on this and other topics, please go to BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information and commentary from James Corbett, please go to CorbettReport.com. Rape innocent civilians.
Nick, you had a chance to speak with the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, the issue being Gaddafi, the Libyans, what they're doing. What did he tell you?
Well, one of the things he wants to investigate now, he says, his priority is to investigate allegations of rape that may be systematic and rape that's being assisted, he said, by the distribution of Viagra or Viagra-like products, sexually performance-enhancing products that are getting in the hands of Gaddafi's forces and are being used as part of gang rape. And these are allegations that are surfacing that he says he wants to investigate as a priority.
Until this pretext was overturned by a pesky reporter asking for actual evidence of these crimes.
How many people have been killed, and in which town, in which site, and what kind of the crimes he has ever done in your investigations?
I advise you to read the application of the process. Weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
But perhaps Kerry wasn't so wrong to expect the public to let him get away with such a transparently hypocritical statement. After all, the public have always been happy to go along with every pretext for war presented to them for decade after decade. After Iraq, there was Libya, where we were asked to believe that the invasion of the oil-rich country and rush to set up a central bank by the foreign-backed opposition was nothing more than an attempt to save the country from a power-mad dictator who was arming his troops with Viagra to help them. Kerry made his now infamous statement about Russia's actions in Ukraine. The hypocrisy was immediately apparent to all but the most clueless of viewers.
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised. The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't, but he had the capacity to make weapons of mass destruction. But I also talked about the human suffering in Iraq. Those
This is an act of aggression that is completely trumped up in terms of its pretext. It's really 19th century behavior in the 21st century. And, you know, the reason for this, David, is because you just don't invade another country on phony pretext in order to assert your interests.
When Secretary of State John Kerry